My name is Marla Pickelsimer. It's March 11th, 2010. Today I'm at the Bradley McIntyre House in Longwood, Florida with John Bistline. He's going to talk today about his service in the military in World War II.
Thank you. I will start by just saying a little bit about myself. I was born in Longwood, Florida and raised here, attended the local schools and graduated from Lyman High School in 1940. After that, I started school at Rollins College as a science major. Along about 1941, we had Japanese attack in Pearl Harbor, and of course, the military conscription began. As a science major, I was deferred until I graduated, and I graduated in 1944, March of that year. Then the problem was, what should I do with my science major? A chemistry professor at Rollins knew about the metallurgical lab at the University of Chicago and suggested I apply there. He said it was a very secret project. He didn't know what they did, but why didn't I apply? So I did, was accepted, and in March of 1944 I went to Chicago and joined the Met Lab. Now it turns out that the Met Lab was a synonym for a project aimed at getting the atomic bomb in production. There were several sites. The one in Chicago was backing the project out in Washington State of making plutonium. There was another project out of Columbia that was supporting the work at Oak Ridge, which was the diffusion plant to separate U-235 from the natural uranium, which was mostly U-238. There was the first time I'd ever heard of nuclear fission. It hadn't been publicized in any book previous to the war, so it all became very confidential. However, when I got there, I found out that there was a reactor outside of Chicago that had been the original reactor that Fermi had built under the stands at the west side. It had been encased in concrete out on the southwest side of Chicago, in some woods, very carefully. The whole site was carefully hidden from any road or anything like that. And so the change had been made so they could increase the power of the reactor, and it had been cased in concrete to reduce the radiation. I therefore arrived and I went to work out there, and my job turned out to be mostly operating the reactor for people who did experiments at the port on the top of the reactor through the concrete, in which a stream of neutrons came up so they could do neutron research to help determine the properties of plutonium, which was just being isolated in very, very small amounts at the chem lab down at the university. I worked mostly at night. My boss liked to do his experiments in the evening, so I was trained in how to operate a reactor. This was going along very well, and there was a site out in the west known as Site Y, which was very mysterious and very secretive. That was where they were making the bomb. We didn't know anywhere about it, except it was called Site Y, and it was in the southwest. It turned out that they had hoped to make the U-235 bomb, the plutonium bomb, the same as the U-235 bomb. About in October of '44, they discovered that there was too much radiation or spontaneous fission in the plutonium to make a bomb like they had for the uranium bomb. The uranium bomb simply was a large cylinder, a hollow cylinder put in a tight case, and then there was a projectile of more U-235, which was shot down the barrel into the hole in the other piece of U-235 to make it large enough so that it produced a bomb very quickly and would blow up. The spontaneous fission in the plutonium would have detonated it before it really got into the hole, so it wouldn't have blown up very efficiently. So a whole new scheme had to be developed. That prompted them to sort of raid all the other facilities that they could to bring people to Los Alamos to work on the situation. And so I was chosen, along with 3 or 4 other people, to go to Los Alamos. Now, here again, we didn't know where it was, but there were 3 of us got together to drive out. Before we left, we had a session with our security officer, who assured us that we shouldn't talk to anybody about it. The 3 of us going out there as civilians might raise some question, but be sure not to mention it. And we did find out that we were going to Santa Fe. And we were told that we had an address that we were to look up, and then they would instruct us further there. So we did go out feeling very cloak and daggish about the whole affair, not talking about it or anything. So when we got there, we came in on a Sunday afternoon, and we looked up our address, which proved to be in the back corner of a courtyard where there was a few offices around, but it was just very insignificant and more cloak and daggish looking than we had thought we might find. And there was a note saying that they had made arrangements for us to stay at the La Fonda Hotel overnight and come back in the morning. Well, we made the trip to the hotel and stayed overnight, and I guess we had breakfast, and the next morning we went down to check out, and the checkout lady said, "Oh, are you boys going to work up on the hill?" And I guess we all felt our cover had been blown, and we stood there with open mouths, and she said, "Well, you needn't be so secretive about it. Everybody knows about it. It lights up like the moon every night up there on the hill. But we don't know what's going on up there." Well, anyway, we went back sort of knowing our cover had been blown. It wasn't so big a secret in Santa Fe as we thought. And they told us how to go up to the hill, and so we went up and got ourselves arranged up there, and then we got our assignments to do. I should also say that they had told us that all our mail would be censored coming in and coming out, which made it even a more cloak and dagger sort of affair. Anyway, I was assigned to work with a group that was using the 235, which came in from Oak Ridge at that time in very, very small amounts, because all they had working were the cyclotrons to separate the U-235. The diffusion plant, which was a much larger unit and could produce U-235 in much bigger quantities, was not yet online. That wouldn't come on until probably the end of July. So we had very small amounts to work with, and our job was to take the U-235, which had been molded into little cubes about 1 centimeter on a side, and or half an inch, and stack it into a pseudo-cylinder and in a box made of polyurethane, and measure the criticality of the subcriticality of this small reactor by putting a counter next to the reactor and a source of neutrons up next to it, and seeing what the multiplication was as we put more plastic around the outside. Later on, a tank was built to see what it would do in water, and we made the little cylinder out of our little spheres out of our cubes, larger and larger as more material came in from Oak Ridge, and then we would measure the criticality of it and plot the size of our sphere, pseudosphere, against the multiplication, I should say, and up to where we thought it would be a sustaining reactor. Along about July, the fusion plant came online, and then the amount of uranium we got per week or month, however it came, I don't remember, jumped dramatically, and we were up almost to the size that we expected the bomb to be, as a filament, as a sphere. The tank was constructed. It was probably about 3.5 feet square and 3.5 feet high, maybe a little higher. And we made up our pseudosphere in a little polyethylene box and set it on a stool in the middle of the tank. And the tank was made so if anything happened, you could open up a valve and drain the water very rapidly and shut the reactor down, or the multiplication down. So we went along doing this, and at last we got one that we thought was pretty close to what we would be, and we were very careful putting the water in. We raised the water up around it carefully, and I guess I should say, I sort of missed that when we got to Los Alamos, we all had to go in the Army. That was part of the deal. So once I got to Los Alamos, I was now officially in the Army, in the Engineering Corps, which was the group that was charged with developing the bomb under General Groves. Anyway, back to my story. I'm now a GI and working there daily. And each time we got more in, as I say, we made it a little bigger. Well, we arrived at what we thought was about the right size, and we made it up and set it in the middle of our tank. And there were some holes put in the polyethylene so the water could get into the reactor, into the U-235 itself, and wouldn't all pour in from the top when we got up there. Well, we started raising the water, and we had our counters set up. And there were actually 4 of us in the experiment at that time. There was a electronic man who made sure all the counters were working properly. We had a guard who was sitting over in the corner, who sat there every time we had the U-235 out of the vault. And he had a pistol, which he laid up on the side of the desk that he was sitting at. And then there was one other fella who was helping, and at the time that we started, the phone rang, and he went over to answer the phone, and we were raising the water slowly. And all of a sudden, the counter started to pick up, and then more rapidly, and we knew that we were going to be overcritical. And so we shut off the water and ran over and opened the valve, and it started down, but in the meantime the water was seeping in among the cubes even more, so the thing continued to go supercritical, and the power was going up rapidly, and the counters were just flying off the wall practically. And so I remember looking into the top of the reactor container there, where the water was, and all I saw was a blue light across the whole thing. And once I'd opened the valve, I took off 90 miles an hour to run outside the building, as did the rest of the people there. And apparently the reactor had gone a little bit higher as water continued to seep in before the water really took effect going down. The fellow on the phone came over and looked in before he left, and he saw a definite glow around the reactor, the U-235 sphere in the pot. It was obviously not expected. It was an accident. We had an unknown amount of radiation. Of course, it shut down. It didn't explode or anything like that, but it was radioactive for quite a little while after the experiment. And so they decided that we should be quarantined in the hospital. So they cleared out a whole wing of the hospital there at Los Alamos and installed the 4 of us in a room there, and then began to take blood samples. That was the way they measured radiation in those days. We did have pocket meters, but they were all off scale. Anyway, they all expected us to die. There was no question about that. It was just a matter of time. However, and we were the first people who got lots of radiation, so they had nobody to compare it with. True guinea pigs. Anyway, about every 4 hours they took blood samples to see if what our blood cells were doing, and it turned out that really they did nothing. But they kept us there for 4 days, and before they let us out, and we became quite famous there as the first nuclear accident that occurred. But anyway, we lived through it. I should say that there were other nuclear accidents at Los Alamos where people were not so fortunate as we were. After our little experiment, there was a series of meetings, as you can imagine, and things were redesigned, and there were new rules made. And so one rule was that when you were stacking up material, if you were stacking up material with a tamper around it of beryllium or something like that, that you always moved the next block that you were building at a tamper around up from the side slowly, and then you raised it up the side if it was going on the top, and listening to the counters, and then you put it over, always in such a way that you could back off if the counters started picking up. Well, the next accident occurred when somebody, Harry Dallion by name, went down to our site. It was off the main corridor, and got a plutonium cylinder out of the vault, and he had a guard with him. We got a guard. I guess there was one always available, and he started to build this thing up. Now, why he did it at night, nobody is quite sure, but he did it all alone, which was forbidden, and he got the reactor critical, and he was able to pick up one of these blocks and hold it a ways, and as he got closer, the counters picked up, and then if he took it away, they went down. So he was going up and down, and he got careless, and the thing got over the top, and he slipped out of his hand down on there, and the thing flared up, and light all around it, and then he was obviously knew he'd done something wrong. He stood there and disassembled the whole thing, and the whole deal was he was really cooked. And Harry Dallion lived for about 3 weeks after that accident, and it was very, very sad. And so that was the second accident. And there was a third accident that occurred much later, after the war was over, in which a fellow was demonstrating how a whole, well, before they set anything out to the field, they checked how supercritical it could get in a bomb casing that was made up. And I should say that what they had done for the plutonium was develop a whole series of explosives which they formed into a lens form, so that what they did with the plutonium was to implode it with a large series of explosive materials around, which they detonated all at once, causing the reactor or the plutonium to push in upon itself and become very supercritical very fast, and then it blew up. Whereas with the U-235, it was a rifle that shot the U-235 in there. They only made one of those. There was only enough uranium to make one of them, By the time the war started, there was enough plutonium, so that the plutonium bomb could be tested, and that was the famous Alamogordo test, and that was before any bomb was dropped. And that blew up satisfactorily, so they knew they had a system to go. The U-235 bomb we assembled at Los Alamos. We all wrote our name on the casing and sent it off to Tinian to be dropped by the people who had been practicing for many years with dummy bombs. The plutonium bomb was sent over to be used, and they had one extra. There were only 3 bombs available at the start of when we started dropping the bombs. The U-235 bomb was the Hiroshima bomb. The next plutonium bomb was the Nagasaki bomb. And then the third bomb did not need to be used. And it's very interesting to talk a little bit about that, because that bomb, the plutonium part, was kept in a little case about, I guess 10 inches cubed, and it had, it was aluminum, it had fins cut in the side of it. So there was some heat given off by the radioactive decay of the bomb, but this could be dissipated through these fins. So the bomb was, the U-235, the plutonium part of the bomb, the little sphere, was kept in this little case that they used to carry it around. The radiation from the bomb was not sufficient to cause any trouble to anybody. And so they brought that bomb home, and it's interesting that the people that brought it home in the little case, there was a guard and one other fellow, a technical man who worked with us. And the bomb was brought back on a boat, and then these 2 fellas got off and got on the Super Chief and had a little compartment, and it was always chained to one of them, but they changed it off, and it was kept under their bed in the suite on the train while they came back from Los Angeles up to, or maybe San Francisco, I don't remember which, up to Santa Fe, where they got off the train and came on home, but nobody knew it was there, so I guess it was safe, and they got it safely back. But that essentially is my story of how I got in the Army, what I did while I was there, and of course after the bombs had been dropped and the war was over, they started decommissioning the people who had been in the Army, and so I was left out of the Army about February of 1945, and went back to Cornell to get my master's. So from then on, I worked in nuclear energy at GE. We were doing experiments there, which of course I was out of the Army by that time, but developing the nuclear reactors to put in the nuclear submarines. So I did the experimental work for that for the next 30 years or so, at which time we had done enough measurements so that the various constants for various things that they would use to compute the size of the reactor was complete. They knew what all these constants were, and people who were the theoretical people could then put the things in the big computers, compute the energy in the reactor and where, excuse me, and where it occurred. And so the experimental division sort of went out of business, because everybody in higher up people always worried about an accident, radiation accident, contamination, and the computer didn't have either of these, so it was the ideal way to design reactors, and the experimental work went out of business. So that sort of sums up my experience in the Army and my experience with the nuclear reactors and how much I did in it, and I enjoyed it very much. Thank you.